This is the Republicanism, Slavery, and Second Great Awakening PowerPoint. I'm going to discuss some things and give some examples and all the cool stuff. So I'm extra excited for you to be on this historical ride with me. I'm going to go over a few things real quick from previous explanations. Hopefully, are you still with me? Perfect. Okay. So period 4 continued. So the Republican culture throughout the time. And we talked about Republican motherhood and this idea of like women need to be more assertive. And Abigail Adams wrote a letter, to remember the women, remember the ladies, and we have voices and we can, help push forward some political strategies if we wish to. And we're just as equal to our counterparts that are male. So the birth of the Republican motherhood, it's a baby step towards equality. And we're going to see, like in Seneca Falls and everything later on, that women's roles are going to start growing. And you're going to start to see the commitment to like the nation, that women are going to start, wanting the right to vote and not having it. They're also going to demand civic virtue, meaning that they should be able to have that idea of voting and fighting, for things that they wish in the country and kind of promoting the development of government, and trusting education of family and Republican values, expand educational opportunities for women, meaning that women should be just as educated as men. Thomas Jefferson on why he said that, he needed to educate his daughter Martha, and the chance that in marriage she will, draw a blockhead, I calculate at about 14 to 1, and the education of her family will probably rest on her own ideas and directions without assistance, meaning that hopefully she'll fall in love, but probably that guy will be a blockhead, and Martha's going to have to know some things in order to help promote her family. So Dr. Benjamin Rush's thoughts on female education. So a couple things I want to go over is the first impressions upon the minds of children are generally derived from women. So women are the major child birthers. They take care of the family and so on and so forth. And Dr. Benjamin Rush had this idea that women need to be educated in order to promote education in the household. A little bit about Benjamin Rush. He was the signer of the Declaration of Independence. He was a civic leader in Pennsylvania. And he campaigned where he became a politician and a social reformer. And then later he was the founder of Dickinson College, and then he attended the Continental Congress. And he was a really well-known person to kind of have ideas on revolutionary ideas, meaning that he's going to push for women to be educated. He's going to push for, in general, for the society to grow. But because women were the caretakers of children, women must concur in all of our plans of education for young men, or no laws will ever render them, and so on and so forth, to push this idea. They're going to qualify women, and for the purpose of Dr. Rush, he wanted everybody to know that women are going to be the ones that are going to push education in the household. So yes, they need to know things like sewing and housekeeping, but they also need to know the principles of liberty and government to train maybe those future males who are, getting raised by their mother and so on and so forth. A more educated mother means more educated children. And patriotism should be deeply ingrained in women's thoughts. Therefore, recognize that women had a stabilizing influence over men. So who would then be restricted from vice by the terror of being banished from their company? Meaning, like, why are we excluding women? Nurturers have just as much power in society, and women need to be properly educated. So that was just Benjamin Rush's take on women education. You're going to get Judith Murray. She's going to be talking about the equality of the sexes. And this is really this is supposed to be kind of like a funny, interesting take on, on how women should be seen and what the difference is. And it's known as an essay. It is written by Judith Murray. It was written in 1770, but did not release until 1779. She published 2 different parts. But really what the point of it was to see that, it's kind of an interesting, fun-loving text that points out that all men are created equal, endowed by their creator, but also armed with this idea. And she wanted to create this idea of a self-made woman, which meaning that you can argue and you can do just as much as men can, and that there's no greatness. Greatness has no gender, so you can expand your knowledge as a female and still have the privileges that a man does. Opportunity and equality for white men. The easing of voting restrictions as we get later on only for white men. So you can see property qualifications, taxpayer qualifications, and obviously universal rights. You're going to start seeing the expansion by 1830 that we're going to start getting, this idea that white males are going to have less and less to actually qualify them to vote. So a lot of states are going to go from having property qualifications to just being taxpayers. Manumission is literally the process where a slave owner releases their slaves. So I know. Here you go.
Dobby?
Master has given Dobby a sock.
What? I didn't.
Master has presented Dobby with clothes. Dobby is free.
So manumission literally just meaning that you are now going to be free as a slave. So that makes me think of Dobby, obviously getting a sock, but you're going to get gradual emancipation in a lot of states. So loyalty, Virginia legislation is going to pass Manumission Act in 1782 regarding that you can, release your slaves. And manumission was used a lot until certain people wanted to take away those rights. Next, you're going to get religious. So Quakers urged to free slaves. They were pretty much on the end of that, wanting no sort of slave restrictions at all, so on and so forth. But the manumission law is also going to mandate that anyone who is manumitting their slaves shall supply support for those under a certain age to help them pay taxes and be part of the state. And intellectually, this is going to push forward. Enlightenment philosophy encouraged men that are equal at any skin color at all. But the Manumission Act of 1792 is repealed. It said that they argued that slavery was a necessary evil, but by 1800 slavery braces into racism, obviously. Early emancipation in the North. So this is obviously before we get the Civil War, but you can start seeing that slavery is prohibited in certain areas. You can also see that states are starting to grant emancipation for their slaves. And then also by the state constitution, you get some sort of emancipation, and then obviously slave states stay slave states. So the debate over slavery, American colonization society in 1817, you're going to get a lot of racial bondage that is going to hinder economic progress. Slaves are needed to be freed and resettled in Africa for fear that there could be potential civil war, which we see later on. The cotton boom is going to distract a lot of people from trying to free their slaves because they're going to need them to work in fields. African Americans saw themselves as Americans and did not want to resettle. They were, given certain areas and they didn't want to. They grew up in the United States. They love the United States and they want to be able to have the same rights as everybody else. You're going to get Bishop Richard Allen. He's going to be an African Methodist, and he's going to create this church that is going to kind of promote citizenship and encourage domestic principles. And it's also known as the AME Church. And it's still there's still a church that is around today, but it's going to be an African American, mostly dominated church. And it's really going to push for those ideas for African Americans. So I will explain this little video to you after you get done watching it.
Richard Allen is an American hero.
He was a pioneer, and he blazed a trail for future generations to follow.
He was the first African American leader to lead through nonviolence.
Richard Allen was born in 1760, a slave to Benjamin Chew of Philadelphia. When he was 7 years old, Chew separated Allen from his family and sold him to Stokely Sturgis in Delaware.
Your mother has already been sold. You've been separated from beloved family members. You're working long, grueling days. You look around and all you see is slavery and bondage and hardship.
At age 17, he joined the Methodist Society, which met in the woods around the Sturgis farm.
That was really the foundational moment in his life when he meets these Methodist ministers who are, going through Delaware and preaching the gospel, and his life is converted. He's literally changed.
The explanation of scriptures helped inform his understanding of who he was as a man.